5 or 10 minutes before a whistle where I get a feeling in my gut, like a horrible feeling in my gut.
I want to win, but at the same time, I can just have a bit of a laugh. Like there's the kind of less pressure on you. Hello, welcome to the latest episode of Leadership Blueprint. Today, we're looking at sport and business. And so I'm really excited to be joined by Hugh Pyle. To tell you a bit more about him, his international career in rugby from Australia to France. He's now working as a mortgage advisor, and he's gone down the Global MBA route as well. So I think his insights into sport, leadership, how that's then translated into his journey, and obviously him going down the educational route, I think it's a really exciting one for us to explore further. I think also what's really nice is how Hugh and I got introduced. So when JOH Partners was sponsoring the Riyadh Rugby at the Dubai Rugby Sevens, Hugh and I got to talk further. So it's really great. We've got to know him on a different level. And I think also his involvement helping promote rugby in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, I think it's just a fantastic thing to include in the podcast today. So Hugh, first off, thanks so much for joining us. I did a really quick intro there because I wanted you to tell the audience a little bit more about your background. So once again, thanks for the intro. And over to you, mate. And looking forward to this. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the intro. I'm glad you got through it. And thanks for having me. Get over to Riyadh. That was a great comp I got to be a part of during the Dubai Seven. So yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome to be part of.
No, absolutely, mate. I enjoyed every minute of it, and I think again, it's just a really exciting time for the region in Saudi Arabia. So yeah, just really glad to do this off the back of it as well. So yeah, looking forward to it. Please give everyone a little bit more of an intro and kind of, I think, the exciting bits of, for me especially, what made you look international as well. Because of course, I think going overseas, just starting with that part from a journey, personal perspective, I think that's a really interesting one.
Yeah. So I for the last up until 18 months ago, I was a professional rugby union player. So out of high school, I didn't know what I was going to do. I always played rugby. I played rugby since I was 7 years old. So I loved it as a sport and a game I'd play with my friends. And then after high school, I didn't know what I was going to do. So I took a year off and I actually worked in a landscaping yard, just helping people get their gravel that they need for their backyard and that kind of things, which was great. And then after a year doing that, I went to uni and I started a civil engineering degree. So my first kind of after high school studies was that. I did 2 full-time years of that. It was a 4-year degree, did the 2 full-time years, but then halfway through the second year, I got a call to move down to, it was originally Canberra, to play in their academy. So that's kind of their B or C team. And I jumped at that chance. I meant kind of getting paid for doing something that I love to do for a game, really.
Everyone's dream, mate.
Exactly. So it's not something, I was 21 at the time. It wasn't something I thought up until that point that was going to be my career. But then once kind of I got a sniff of it, I thought, I can do this as a career and latched onto that. And that was turned into a 13-year career. So after Canberra, I went to Melbourne and was in Melbourne for 4 years playing in Super Rugby competition. Left my studies behind, and then after 4 years, I kind of got, I'd say a bit itchy. I'd been playing Super Rugby for 4 years. I wasn't seeing much progression in myself, and I was I'm from Australia originally. I live in New Zealand now, but all my friends are traveling. We kind of spoke about it before, where everyone from Australia and New Zealand kind of loved to do 1 or 2 years overseas. And just with the way my life had progressed to that point, I'd missed out on that. And I was, I'm sure they were jealous of me being able to play sport for a living, but I was extremely jealous of them being able to go overseas and see the world, I think.
Well, also it's because you're so far away as well. I think it makes a lot of sense to you guys to want to do those years away, because you're always, even a holiday is a big commitment. Jumping on the plane for like a day.
Exactly. I think we're far away down the bottom of the world, Australia and New Zealand. So and we consume a lot of content that's either Europe based or America based. So I think what we want to do once we can is have the freedom to go explore these places that we've seen a lot of. So so that's what I wanted to do. And luckily, well, amazingly for me, I got a call from Stade Français in Paris. So which is a very old, very traditional, amazing rugby union club, and they said, come live in Paris and play rugby." And
Dream.
I wouldn't even say, yeah. I mean, it is a dream, and I'm really glad I chose the decision to do it. But it wasn't an easy decision because I was kind of on the cusp of playing in the national team there for Australia at that point, and I probably reflecting, I'm pretty confident that if I hung around for another year or two, I would have done that. And I factored that into my decision making. So I said, look, I'll fly over to France and I'll do, the original contract was 2 years. I'll go over there, I'll do 2 years, and then I'll come back and I'll still be young enough and I'll have a bit more experience and I'll still have the ability to play for the national team. And then I went over there and I just absolutely loved it. So I ended up staying over in France for 7 years, and I got calls to come back to Australia, but I didn't really put those options on the table because I was loving life so much. So I was at Stade Français for 6 years in Paris, and then my last year in France was down at Bayonne, so in Aveyron-Bayonnais, which is the south of France. It's about an hour north of San Sebastian, so on the French-Spanish border. And that was during COVID, and then I was ready to wrap it up, and then I got an opportunity to go to Japan. So I went to Japan and played for Toshiba, just in Fuchu, outside of Tokyo, for 2 years. So
I forgot you did that. I forgot you did that. Oh my God, man. That's so
I
cool.
didn't forget I did. Yeah, that was my last contract. I wrapped up there, which was great. And then I've moved back I live in New Zealand now. I'm married a Kiwi. I married when I was one that I met in Melbourne and took to France with me. And then we had a couple of kids overseas and had to decide either to move to Australia and New Zealand, and New Zealand won. So yeah, so now
the wife one.
exactly. Yeah.
No, nice one, mate.
Yeah, so that's probably the quickest my career that I've done, but that's kind of how it went.
No, it's super fascinating, and I think for me, kind of, and for the listeners, I think what was you mentioned, the weighing up process of moving overseas, the difficult decision. What was like? Was it a case of pros and cons? Was it a case of, I'm willing to, the adventure is more than, the potential of staying? What for you were some of the tipping points? So I think it's really key. I mean, a lot of people kind of struggle with that decision of, an expatriate moving overseas for a business opportunity, whatever it might be. What was the process kind of you went through to eventually say, yeah, this is why I should do it, and so on?
Yeah. There definitely wasn't one thing. There was a multitude. So the ability to travel and see the world was huge to me. That's something I value, is just experiencing other cultures and experiencing adventures. So I'd been in Australia my whole life, and I was happy there. Everything was easy, but it was probably too easy. So the opportunity to go to France, speak a different language, and live a different lifestyle, and see what else is out there in the world was just amazing to me. And I knew with the career I was in, there's certain limitations as to what you can do. So not everywhere you can go and get paid for rugby. And France is probably from Australia, one of the more diverse kind of regions that you could go to.
Yep.
And then on top of that, of course, you paid well. So that's definitely an important factor, because it's a financially viable thing to do. Where I didn't see it as taking a step backwards, because I'm still getting paid as well or better than I would be if I stayed at the same place. So the biggest down factors was, of course, leaving the family, friends, and the comfort. As I said, things were very easy. When I was in Melbourne, I had good friends. I was close to my family. I could speak to everyone, which was huge moving to France. Making that jump is definitely scary, but I don't know anyone that really regrets that kind of move, even if it's going realizing you don't like it and going back. Knowing that you've done it is such a good kind of trajectory of growth. So even and that's kind of what it came down to. I went, well, look, I could go and I'll hate it and I'll just come back. Like it's not. I'll learn stuff about myself and it'll be fine.
No, 100%. And I think that was similar mindset for myself when moving to Dubai 16 odd years ago or so. Was why not? I think there is a lot
Yeah,
of that whole, it's a little bit easier someone from the UK because it's not as far a travel, but I think it's you have to grab opportunities in life. I mean that's the most important thing. I'd rather regret trying something than not. So yeah, I think that's a definite one I'd agree with. So
yeah.
in terms of kind of through your sporting journey, um, what's been some of the biggest lessons from a team sort of building perspective that you've kind of learned? And I think because we see a lot of sport, mental health, healthy mind, healthy body, the synergy is huge. And I just think, what are some of those biggest lessons that you've learnt from the playing days that have sort of translated into the journey you're on now on the corporate side?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think there's definitely some transferable kind of learnings from sport that transfer into business. One of the biggest ones that I kind of notice, and I always talk about with my rugby friends, is that everything's easy when you're winning. So
Mm,
whether it's business or rugby, if you're doing well, it doesn't really matter what you're doing behind the scenes because you're winning.
yeah,
Everything's tracking. The bad things really come out when you're not doing so well. Um, yeah, so like rugby's rugby is like high pressure, dangerous problem solving. I think like that's how
yep,
I kind of put my lens on it. Is you you're doing things that are dangerous. You do physically get hurt, and it's stressful. It's extremely stressful, physically and mentally. And you've got
yeah,
to be able to solve problems in a high pressure environment. So what I've found coming out of rugby, moving into a business sense, is that I'm kind of more equipped for high pressure situations than I would have been otherwise. I mean, the 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 fallout of making a bad decision isn't as bad as kind of what I've been used to. So it's a lot kind of easier to deal with setbacks. I'd say I'm quite a high resilience individual where um, I can just keep going forward because I know how to. I've had a lot of setbacks and I know how to get over them. And I know you just got to keep moving forward. So I
mm,
think that's probably from my rugby career the biggest kind of individual trait that I'm bringing out of that is resilience. Like that's um, yeah, it's just something that I was taught. It was or something I learned through rugby. It's not something that I
yeah,
read
yeah.
a book about. I learned through a lot of setbacks.
And you mentioned obviously, as we know, rugby is a dangerous sport, and we mentioned moving to France and the language barrier. How did you kind of overcome some of that from a on the pitch? There's like almost an added danger probably with a language barrier. How did you kind of deal with some of that? Because I think that's kind of something that's probably never spoken about as much. From a, it's fun to go and enjoy. You want to,
Yeah,
you're furthering yourself, but from a physical on the pitch moment, it must have been that extra level of difficulty for, and also a safety thing. How did that kind of play out for you?
yeah. I'd actually find it. I actually found on the pitch is probably the easiest out of everything there was
Okay.
to do. I probably found it was the easiest because once you're not working, you're not thinking a lot about what you're doing when you're on a rugby field. You're doing stuff out of practice. I mean, that's why you practice every day. You're doing stuff out of the years that you've done before. So you're not making a lot of decisions. You're kind of just reacting and doing what
Mm,
your body and mind feels right. Um, and then I mean, you do need language to communicate with your teammates, but it's all short, sharp, one word communication. It's not in depth explanations because those are the kind of
yeah.
things that you'll do in the practice. So what I found hardest was practice. So turning up to practice and trying to communicate um, how I'd done things previously, how my French teammates are doing things, how which way we think works better and why, and trying to come to a good conclusion where we can work on the same path. That was harder. Whereas if
Yeah.
whistle blows and it comes back to what I said before, like it's a high pressure problem. You don't have time to make a decision when you've got someone trying to hurt you. So you just kind of do what feels like what you should feel like you should do, and that's yeah. So that's just the building blocks of practice that make you make that decision.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so obviously those guys, they reached out to you, they wanted you to come, they saw something in you that, it was a gap in their team. Obviously that's obvious from signing of a player, hiring of a person for a business. But how did you then kind of approach and overcome, like I said, part of the cultural difference? So you're trying to learn the culture, you're trying to impart yourself into them. You've mentioned there a bit about the language. But how did you feel that, was it a case of they're asking you to come in and say, right, in this position, we have an issue that really needs solving? Or were they bringing you more in to say, right, you know, just slot into our way? I think that's always interesting. One of are you slotting in, or are you bringing something to them? And how did you bring something to them, especially with the sort of the language barrier part? Because I think that's always a kind of interesting one to get.
Yeah, it's extremely interesting. I think you're shooting yourself in your foot if you come into a new environment and try to enforce your way. Like
Mm.
um, unless you've been bestowed power upon. So if you come into a CEO, maybe it's a bit different. But if you're coming in as an equal player, then what
Yeah.
the best way you can kind of move forward is finding out how the team operates, finding out how everyone else operates, and kind of mirroring that. So trying to slot yourself into their way of doing things rather to enforce yours. And I saw that happen quite a lot through. We had different roles of coaches. From we'd get New Zealand coaches coming in and teaching France team, or South African coaches coming in and doing French teams, and they tried to operate like they'd been operating in their whole home country, and it just doesn't
Mm.
work. It doesn't resonate with the players, and they don't want to be treated like New Zealand players or South African players or Australian players. They want to be treated like French players. That's their way of how they learn messages and how they learn. So it's better to adapt to the way that they're doing it. So,
Mm.
and it's extremely frustrating. It is an extremely frustrating process to go through. And their first kind of after the honeymoon period of being in Paris and living that life and going, wow, this is amazing on every corner. Trying to integrate to the team is really hard. So I started by thinking, oh look, I've come here from Australia. I know all these different things that can help these people. I'm gonna give all my knowledge. I'm gonna make this team better by telling everyone what I know.
Mm.
And that's not kind of the best way to operate, because they don't want to hear it. They don't know who you are as a person. They don't care. They don't know if they can trust you. They don't know if they like you. They don't know if they want to listen to you. So going in there straight away and trying to push stuff down people's throats is just not a good way to go about things. And it took me a while to learn that, but I'm really glad I did. It was um, one of the going back to things I learned from rugby is I moved over to France as an extremely um, we call it red dot in New Zealand, but extremely analytical process. This is the way you do things. Don't deviate from that. It's a straight line, and stay on that line. If you're off the line, you're not doing what the team needs to be doing. And France doesn't operate like that at all. France is more heart, which which I really struggled with at the start, but now I love. So I had to change how I operate, and that helped me. So that's why I was able to stay there for so long, because I kind of integrated within the team. I started becoming more like them, which was great. So I loved it.
No, that's cool, and I mean that's a really super important one for I think everyone to take away is the whole, you're an individual and you've been given opportunity because they see something in you, but you need to integrate as well. And I think that across all parts of life, and I think cultures that integrate better, the country is more harmonious, and from a business to a bigger level, it's key for that sort of integration. I mean, if you were to then say, so we've talked about France, then obviously towards the end of the playing career, there's Japan, and that's extremely different again. Was there any of the kind of learnings that translated across, i.e., just go and try and integrate as best as I can, but equally give them knowledge? Or was it, I'm at a different point in my career and I'm bringing something very different to those guys? Was it the stage of your career that meant you approach it differently, or was it look, take all these lessons and just rinse and repeat, or how did that kind of operate differently in Japan being a very different culture as well?
Yeah, Japan. I see France and Japan as complete opposites in
Mm,
how they work in employment base. So France is very hard, very passion driven, whereas Japan's very hierarchical. Um, you can what I saw in Japan is people following instructions, doing what they've been told to do, and doing really good job, but they wouldn't necessarily believe in what they wanted to do, so they would be following rather than um, having that kind of intrinsic motivation to do something. Um,
okay.
I I was not. I was a. I would say I wasn't a good person. Oh, not a good person. I don't want to say I'm not a good person. I wanted to say I was probably not a great employee in Japan. So we went there kind of halfway through COVID. I was separated from my kind of 5-month-old baby and my wife and my 3-year-old for 6 months, and I didn't integrate. So I tried to learn language. It's extremely difficult. It's a lot harder to learn Japanese than French, what I found. And
Yeah.
I probably didn't put as much effort into integrating as I did in France. And on saying that, it probably took me 2 years to fully integrate into the French team, and I only had a 2-year contract in Japan, so I didn't. I just didn't get there. I didn't get to a point where I'd say that I was trusted by anyone, and there was anyone within the team, other players. There's definitely the thing about Japanese people is they'll definitely listen to you, which is it's really nice. You can go and you can. I could find someone junior in my position. I could go, hey, think I think you should do this for this reason, and they'll listen and they'll try it because they always want to get better.
Yeah, yeah.
But I didn't get to a point where I'd see myself anywhere close to being a leader within the team because I didn't do the work myself. I didn't integrate. I didn't do the work to integrate.
Okay, and that's really interesting as well because I think sport is slightly different because you have a shorter career, So I think there is that whole, you're seen as that experienced veteran, but even with that experience, you still it still didn't you still didn't get to walk in and just command the room. You still had to earn that respect, and like you said, you didn't quite put the yards and it didn't quite work. So it's interesting, and I think I think that's something which the outside looking in, I think people do assume, oh, you get to a certain level, everyone just listens to you. But no, as you're saying, they'll listen a bit, but you still need to earn their respect, and you still need to do the fundamentals. So I think that's super interesting.
Yeah, I think like you can leverage your what's the word? I had an absolute mind blank. You can leverage your reputation quite well.
Mm-hmm.
Can leverage it into positions, but then once you're in those positions, it's your performance that matters. So in France, I was able to leverage my reputation to get a contract in Paris, and but then once I was there, I performed really well. Whereas Japan, I didn't. I got to Japan on my reputation, but once I was there, I didn't perform well. So then your kind of status diminuates because people go, look, maybe I've heard this guy's great, but what I'm seeing is not. You believe your own eyes before you believe newspapers or anything about someone's reputation. If I can see what this guy's doing and I'm seeing that this guy's not performing, he's not a great player, then that kind of
Yeah.
diminishes the reputation. So so I think that was a huge difference between the two. When I went to France, I was playing really well. When I went to Japan, I wasn't playing as well, which comes down to a lot of factors. I was getting older and I'd had some medical stuff. So um, yeah, just how it rolled.
Yeah. And with sport being slightly different because injuries and things they affect you in a much greater way because it stops you physically being able to do your job. How did you kind of overcome, some of the injuries throughout the career? Because that's a real different mindset. I am employed, paid well to deliver on the pitch, and an injury stops me doing that. How did you kind of go through that mental anguish in a way of the time away from the pitch in with different injuries, shorter, longer? Was there sort of mechanisms? How did you play through that?
Yeah, that probably comes down to uh, like anything in life. It's a multitude of factors. So when I probably the first, I'd say 2/3 to 3/4 of my career, I was mentally really where I needed to be to get injured. I still knew I had longevity in my career, so there was a real impetus for me to come back from injury and be a good rugby player. Um,
Mm.
and because of how rugby's structured, you're on year-to-year contracts. So if you get injured and you want to still be a rugby player, you need to come back. You need to put the
Yeah.
work in. Um, the problem is there's you can get injured and you can get mentally distraught, and I mean it is. You can do back-to-back injuries. I did one knee, had surgery, came back 3 weeks later, did the other knee, had to have surgery, same surgery, and then that's the kind of stuff that just destroys you because you really lose a lot of your physical kind of cardio and physical base um,
Mm.
over time, and it's real hard to build back up, and it's mentally draining, and you see everyone else, you see, people that were positionally below you kind of progressing, and now they're above you, and it is a big mental toll, but if you want it, you've got to keep moving forward. So it's you've kind of got that intrinsic motivation to move forward because if that's the life you want to live, if you still want to be a rugby player, you've got to get up and do it. That's you don't have any other option.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And was there any sort of specific? The answer to this maybe no, but was there anything specific that you would almost make yourself go through as a regime to kind of deal with some of those stresses or setbacks? Was there any sort of, over the years, were there things that you found, look, I know me as an individual, if I do A, B, C, I have a much better chance of mentally being in the right frame of mind? Or was there anything like that that you kind of over time built up? I mean, it's part of resilience, but was there anything specific?
Um, I mean, yes and no. I say yes and no because there were. I'd say when I was at the peak of my career, when I was playing really well, there was really specific things that I would do. I'd have a real structured routine around rehab and how I prepare myself and journaling and those kind of outside the rugby field things that I would do that would help me on the rugby field. And then
Mm.
I'd say no because when my career started to drop, those things dropped as well. That was some of the first things to go. So there's definitely things that do help me, but I wouldn't say that I am. I wouldn't want to put myself across there as someone that is so headstrong and determined that does them all the time. I've definitely had, roller coasters of doing
Yeah,
what
yeah,
needs to be done, and what helps me perform, and things that where I drop off. And some of that comes back to where I am personally in my life, which is always important, and then where I am within a team. So some team environments, I kind of my values clashed with the team values, and that affects how I put myself forward in a team. So um,
mm,
there's one instance. I'll just give this instance of to illustrate the point is there was one game when I was playing early in my career and I dislocated my shoulder and it hurt, but I still wanted to play, so I still wanted to get up and play, and I didn't know at that point that it was dislocated, but I still wanted to perform even though I was in extreme pain. A
mm.
couple of years later, different environment, wasn't as happy in that environment, but I thought I'd tore my hamstring, came straight off the field. Turns out that I'd done nothing wrong. It was just a little, a little bit of pain, but it was fine. But I
Yeah.
put that to um, how I am in my personal life and how I am in that team. So, I wasn't willing to push through barriers for if I was unhappy or kind of just going through the motions. But if I was in a place where I'm striving, then that's when I'm going to go. I'm going to push through barriers and do harder stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, that's really, really interesting there because there's the added bit of even though you had the ability, if you're mentally not there, ability almost falls away. So I think it's an interesting one to kind of see, and I mean, within business, you will know this, when things are going well, but things are going well because the culture's good. Things are going well because there's mentorship, because there's the right leaders, because everybody's empowered, because all these things they line up that people enjoy doing what they're doing. They're happy to put in the extra time when needed, or they don't moan about having to do the later night shift or missing a kid's bedtime as a one-off and things because they're enjoying what they're doing, versus when you're not enjoying what you're doing, everything's a problem, everything's a pain. Your boss is annoying. You don't want to do these things. So it's interesting to see, because I think with sport there is, like I said, there's that added bit of a physical ability on top, which you would assume would always override it and just say, "Oh, I'll get on with it," but it doesn't. It still is down to that mental wellness, health, and I think it's really interesting. You see, is society's kind of become more aware of these things, and we were talking before we started recording about career coaches, about psychology, and I think that's more and more coming into things, and it is really important on both sides, and you can see kind of you see sports teams where there isn't that harmony in the dressing room, and they just play awful on the pitch. And then the next week they are a bit more harmonious, and they go and do a fantastic performance, and it's chalk and cheese. And it's interesting, and I think it's the psychology side is becoming more and more prevalent. It's interesting to see for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely it's definitely interesting. That the problem is that, well, my reading of it and through my experiences, there are so many factors that affect the harmony of a team. Um,
Mm.
there's definitely things that leaders and managers can do that help it, but there's so many things that can be unseen and you don't know about. So you kind of just got to, well, the best teams I know create an environment where people can kind of come straight to it and go, look, this isn't going well, and they can have open conversations about it. People might not have the answers, but at least everyone's on kind of willing to share. Because the
Yeah.
worst teams are the teams where everyone just kind of hides in their corner and talks badly about other people on the team. That's never leads to success.
No, 100%, 100%. You never need that poison chapel, chalice of an individual who's kind of never got anything good to say. No, 100%. So
Yeah, but I wouldn't even say it's individuals. I've seen it because I've been with some teams for long
mm,
time periods of time. The same guys that are talking bad. I think that's a reflection of the environment. I don't think that's a reflection of the individual. I think that's just them not having the kind of ability to say that in a larger platform. They need to get that release, so they'll do it in the locker room. Whereas I don't think
right.
it's yeah, and then those people in a good environment are great people. They don't talk badly about everyone. So I don't think it's about. I don't really think it's like an individual type person that will talk badly about someone in the locker room. I think it's a reflection of the environment that's how they can release that kind of pressure that they're under or the stresses they're under. I think if you can create the environment where they can talk openly about it or have a kind of way of getting that out, they won't do it in the locker room. So I think that's I put that to a reflection of the environment rather than the individual.
That's a really interesting point, and yeah, I like that actually. It resonates a lot. Okay, so we're getting towards Japan's kind of the 2-year contracts coming to an end. What's kind of your mindset then on what's next? Had you got a plan in place? Had you kind of said, let's see what happens? How did we kind of go from Japan to MBA to mortgage advisor? How do we kind of, go that
Yeah,
kind of route down there?
yeah. So it started. When I was in France, I did a business degree through Toulouse Business School, and then kind of had I think 8 months off study, and then I was in a point where I knew my career was getting to the end. I mean, I ended up having 4.5 more years at this point, but I thought maybe I was 1 to 2 at best. And I thought, well, what's the most I can do to be prepared for after study wise? So I was like, well, I'll do an MBA because um, at least I can learn.
Yeah,
I've got enough and I may as well learn as much as I can before I go and try to shift into a different industry. So I started doing that, and I loved it. I mean, I was doing a really flexible program, thankfully, through Macquarie University in Australia. So I kind of jumped in and out. I had a couple of kids and kind of moved from France to Japan and then to New Zealand, where I finally finished it. So I had a lot going on in my life, which was great that I was part of a program that could kind of facilitate that. But I kind of, at the point where I decided that's what I wanted to do, I kind of came to a realization that my bubble or like my sphere of influence was quite small. I was probably 9 or 10 years into the career, and large majority was either school friends or people my age, or the large majority was rugby players. So I was hanging out a lot with rugby players and talking a lot with rugby players, and it was kind of a really small world that I was living in. So this kind of I knew I'd known a couple of guys that had done MBAs, and I talked to them about it, and they're like, "Yeah, it's great. You get to meet a lot of people from different roles of life and talk through a lot of group projects and that kind of stuff." And because I wasn't certain on what I wanted to do after rugby, I was like, "Look, this is going to be great. I can meet people from different walks of life. I'll talk to them about their jobs, what they do they enjoy it, and try to find out if it was a good fit for me." Um, so yeah, so I started doing that, and I loved it. It was great in terms of just seeing how big the corporate world is, and kind of how many roles there are and what you can do in your life. Um,
Yeah.
so I enjoyed it, and just thinking about different things rather than rugby in contact and going to the gym. So that was great. And then once I finished rugby, moved to New Zealand, and I don't really have a network here. So my wife does. She grew up here, so she's got a lot of family and friends, and I'm 1 degree or 2 degrees separated from them, but I don't have my own school friends to rely on, or my family members that could get me, it could introduce me to the right people or find me some good jobs. And then it's also, I'm at a point where I'm jumping out of my rugby career, and all I can say is, look, yeah, I've played rugby for 13 years, and I've got an MBA. What am I going to do? So I talked to, and sorry, I should say, in relation to that, I've always been interested in by financial markets and financial advice. So originally the plan was financial advisor. Jumped into with a friend's kind of mortgage business firm, started doing mortgage advice, and now I'm concurrently doing my papers to do financial advice at the same time. So that's what I kind of, my first stop. I always thought that after rugby I would jump into the first job I could get and jump around as much as I could until I found exactly what I liked. One thing with rugby is that you kind of miss those years in your 20s where you're gaining industry experience and finding out exactly kind of what you'd like. If I didn't rugby, I would have finished my civil engineering degree. I would have jumped into a firm, and I would have found out kind of the pathways that I wanted to find to be where I wanted to be. And I don't have that luxury now. So I'm 36. I've got 2 kids, a wife, and a house. I've got a mortgage to pay. I can't start at a graduate. It just wouldn't work with me. So, so this is kind of the ways I can move as fast as possible, and learn as much as possible. And so far I love it. So I really like it, but I wouldn't say I've got it all worked out yet.
Mate, no one's ever got it all worked out. I've got the 2 kids and the mortgage and the dogs and the cats and all that, and still nothing's worked out. And I think, I know this episode's more about you, but to give you some insight, kind of my journey is a little strange, because I think I did kind of things a little back to front. So even being in the corporate world for your career, it still doesn't quite go as you plan. I originally was a mechanical engineer with the Ministry of Defence, so did that as an apprenticeship. So I didn't go down the A levels route as you would in the UK. I did an apprenticeship, so did these BTECs, HNCs, MVQs, and all that, and then realized it's not the journey for me at all. So then I went as a mature student to university in sports science. So did something in a completely different sphere, and was going to go down that route, and one thing led to another, and without boring the listeners, ended up in recruitment and loved it, and everything else. But for me, it was realizing I was more of a people person, and the engineering was not what I wanted to do. But I'd already invested 4 years and had numerous qualifications, and just threw it all away anyway. So I think the route you've done, mate, in the MBA is a really sensible one. So I think for that side, the bit I was super interested in is, obviously, professional sport, it's very structured, i.e. you have physical gym training, then you have sessions around the plays that you're going to do, you have your recovery time, you have your diet, everything is quite laid out, and you have that really close team bond, which is on another level to a corporate environment. How did you go from that very structured environment to what probably felt like being almost in a startup. You have the freedom to do what you want. You can eat what you want. You can stay up late. You can go and enjoy yourself. Kind of, how did
Yeah,
you make that transition?
it is. It is a really strange thing to go through. I would say, uh, especially later in my career,
Mm.
it's me, my wife, and two kids, and the most important thing almost is that I get enough sleep because I've got to get up and I've got to train and I've got to perform, and that's our reliance kind of thing. That's what we're relying on to move forward. That's how we make money. So
Okay.
we don't have weekends because we play weekends, and then the next day is recovery. So we can't plan a lot of social activities, that kind of stuff. And I'd say after doing it for 13 years and playing rugby all my life, I'd had enough. I'd had enough of giving up my weekends. I'd had enough of being silver spooned. So I didn't want to be, most teams would be, hey, we've got to meet at 9. If you're here at 9:01, you get in some kind of punishment. You're treated like that, and which is how the teams have to operate. You need to operate like that because you're trying to get 50 blokes on board and doing the same thing. So you do need to operate like that. But I was kind of sick of it. Whereas
Yeah.
I think when I moved to Japan, I was 34, 35, and there's someone in my position that's 19, and we're treated the same, which is, once again, it's necessary for that. Well, I don't know if it's necessary for that environment, but I got over it. So I was quite happy to move on from that kind of lifestyle. And now, so the role I'm in is kind of I can work remotely if I need to. I get that autonomy, and I thrive on autonomy. I've always been someone that is happy to set my own goals and work out the way to achieve them. And I'm fairly disciplined, so I can, if I want to do something, I'll get it done. Like I don't worry about that.
Yeah.
That's not for everyone, but that's how I operate. So I'm fine with it. I'm actually quite good with it. But the thing that isn't a letdown, and it goes back to what I was saying at the start, where me and my performance was important to the family. It's not anymore. So if I want to go to the gym, it's not important anymore. Which is that's a rude awakening. And if I have to go to the gym as well, it's something that I want to do in my free time. Which previously I was packed for it, and I got to do it with all my mates, and it was easy and it was all structured. Whereas now it's not. So the physical side of it, the kind of me time, I get a lot less of it now. And that's, I've got to find different ways to adapt. So I now spend a lot more time with my kids, and that helps me mentally.
Yeah.
So I see that, and that's kind of the trade-off of the social environment that I had from the rugby team. And I go to a gym that's extremely social, so I can get that social aspect while working out. So I've had to rebalance how I live my life, but it's overall it's been positive.
No, that's really cool. And so, just on, obviously when we met at the sevens and things, is for you now the sevens like this fun release of, I want to win, but at the same time I can just have a bit of a laugh? Like there's the kind of less pressure on you, or is it just, again, I'm back into the old mode, I want to win, and does it switch back and forth, or is it, look, at this point of the career, it's just fun to play with less things on my shoulder? How does that kind of play out for you?
It's a really good question. It's really funny. I thought so. The tournament we did, probably 2 months ago now, but it was the first time I'd played rugby since finishing, and I was thinking, oh, it's just going to be fun. Like I'm not going to care about winning. I'm just going to go out there and have fun playing rugby. But then as soon as I stepped onto that field, I could almost physically feel myself become a lot more competitive. And I think that's just part of the ingrained kind of sensibility that I've had from probably from when I started playing rugby at 7. So as soon as I was on that field, I wanted to win as much as I ever wanted to win, because I also I know the rewards of winning. I know that winning is important to me. So it's just
You'd missed your dopamine fix.
yeah. It's like I love competition. I really do. So I love being able to strive for a win. So yeah, I thought it would be.
Yeah.
I thought it would be I thought I'd have a lot less weight on my shoulders about winning, but as soon as I was on there, it was just like any other game I'd played in the last 20 years. I was keen.
And it's I kind of asked that question knowing the answer, but wanted the audience to hear it. I think what was really interesting for us chatting to yourself and the other players was seeing you guys be nervous, like healthy nervous, like a little bit nervous. Like, yeah, I think there was just that bit of a, you wouldn't expect it. I think we were like, oh, they play for much bigger teams and environments and crowds, and these guys are still there's still an edge to it, and it's yeah, it kind of never goes away. It was kind of interesting to see for sure. So it was really cool.
I hated that. I still hate those nerves. That like, there's about 5 or 10 minutes before a whistle where I get a feeling in my gut, like a horrible feeling in my gut of this is not the right thing to be doing with your life, basically. And then once the whistle goes, I'm sweet. But that was just part of how I processed things. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's probably a good thing that it's there because it's part of me caring. So
yeah,
no, every game I played, I felt nervous, and win, lose or draw, I felt nervous. So it was always just part of me.
Yeah. So by no means have you got all the answers, and as we said, you're still on your kind of transition journey. But what would be your bit of advice for somebody who's maybe in their 30s playing professional sport, they haven't quite got their plan together yet? Is there any bit of advice you'd say to somebody, look, go do ABC or think about XYZ, just to kind of get your head in the game, because before you know it, the days are over?
Yeah, like I've got a lot of advice, and the issue with me giving advice is that I would be giving the same advice that I got, and I didn't listen to it.
Yep.
It's people go like, if I could have my time again, I would have spent a lot of my down days kind of trailing people. So saying, hey, meeting people through, you get ample chance to meet a lot of cool people through rugby, through networking opportunities and such. And saying, hey, look, I'm really interested in what you're doing. Can I just trail you for a day? And having that confidence to do that, that would have really helped me, because I'd know what people do with their days in a corporate sense. I'd be like, well, this guy's these guys are people and culture. Let's go see what he does for a day, what's important to him, and what kind of decisions he's making. But it's really hard to do, because at the same time, you're giving your time off for something that possibly doesn't have a benefit for you. And as a professional sportsman, you need that time off because that's your recovery time. So it's a big balance. So it's hard to, I don't know. I'd always say for anyone possible, if you can do an MBA, do an MBA, because it's a great way of meeting people and kind of you are progressing. You get a physical, or you get you get a box tick at the end where you say, look, I've completed this, and that does matter moving forward, because then employers can look at you and say, look, he must have his smarts at some point of time if he's been able to go through that.
Yeah.
But it is extremely hard, unless it's the same old thing. No one really knows what they want to do in their life. Like, it's really hard to figure it out.
Yeah, 100%, mate, 100%. And yeah, as I was saying before we started the episode, is I speak to people, CEOs who are in their 50s, and yes, they still couldn't exactly tell you how they got to where they are. And some of them are happy in their job, but still have that. Wish I'd done something else, good at what they do, but passion sits elsewhere. And I think it is difficult to get that balance between passion and ability and money, and I think I have a photography side hustle is a real passion, but I think I prefer this as the career, but it's fun to have that on the side, and that makes a little bit of money on the side for me, but it's never going to be the thing I could do all day every day. I think there is that mental space. So in terms of for yourself, like when we were talking about from sport, your setbacks might be a loss, your setbacks might be an injury, but when we're talking about the corporate world, your setbacks can be a deal not being signed, a client not believing in you in coming across and working with you and things. So yes, there are setbacks, but they're different. Have you been able to take any lessons from the playing career setbacks into the corporate world, or is it learning a whole new set of skills on dealing with setbacks? Did any of it translate across?
Yeah, definitely. The I I'm quite an emotional character. So after losses, well, even after wins sometimes, if I'd never thought that I'd done the job that I needed to do, I was quite hard on myself. I'd dwell on it, and I'd be a head down kind of person, and it would take me a good. But at the start, it took me 2 or 3 days to get over a bad performance, and then until I could move forward. Um,
Hmm.
as I matured and as I learned some things, um, it took me 2 seconds. So I got to a point where I could finish a game, win, lose, or draw. I'd head up and I'd be moving forward because I'd be able to leave the past behind. And I'm not saying that in the way that I'd forget about it. I'd learn my
Yeah.
lessons and I'd take to learn the lessons from it. But I'd realize that dwelling and sadness that I'd put into it, it wasn't helping me in any way move forward, and it wasn't helping me with the next job that I needed to do. So that kind of getting over things really quickly has been really helpful moving forward. So now it's the same thing. If a client doesn't want my services, that's fine. I can move forward, and then I can reflect on that and say, well, what's gone wrong exactly, and what could I have done different? And I'll either modify or I'll go, look, I did everything I need to do, and it just didn't work out, so I'll just move forward. Like there's no point in me dwelling on the past as much. So that's probably something that I took that's really helpful. That's really helpful to me in my life.
Okay. No, that's I mean that's really solid advice for anybody. And yeah, I think we can all be guilty of hanging on to some bad memories, but I think it's it's learn and move on is as quickly as possible is a really good skill for sure. I know we mentioned, in a minute there's the mortgage advice, you're looking at the extra goals around sort of the financial advice, so the learnings you're doing on the side for that. So for you then, do you have kind of an ultimate goal in mind, or is it still, look, I'm breaking things down into segments, and the next segment is the financial advice, and do you have that ultimate goal? Where are you on that journey, or are you taking it kind of contract by contract, as it were?
Yeah, I'm definitely still working it out. I think the things that I value the most is working with people. Like I really enjoy the aspects of my job where I get to talk to people. That's kind of what drives me a lot. So, and then additionally to that is kind of analytical kind of process. So I like doing that. So, in terms of where I'm going to go, I don't know, and I'm definitely still working that out. It's just
Mm.
I, it's been so good finishing rugby and just jumping into career and learning. Like I feel like a baby again, which is it's yeah. I was 13 years where I was really good at what I was doing, and I got to point where I was like, I think I'm good here. Like I know everything. I'm great. And then going backwards and starting again is really helpful for me in terms of I just get to learn so much. And yeah, so to answer your question in a roundabout way, no, don't know where I'm going, but enjoying the journey and enjoying talking to people and meeting people and yeah.
Yeah, no, mate, that's great. And on the rugby journey, is this is kind of I suppose, a two-parter. What's kind of been if there was one moment you could relive from a pure joy perspective, just something that just, oh my God, loved it, wish I could hold on to it forever, bottle that emotion kind of thing. Love to know what that is. And then also, is there effectively a biggest regret? And that might just, I don't mean losing a game, or is there specifically, an interaction or something? So it'd be great to hear kind of the ultimate high, and I don't know if the ultimate low is the right phrase, but one of those, I remember this for these reasons, and it can be a life lesson, or it can be a frustration, whichever. But I'd love to know those two. That would be really interesting.
Yeah, there's been I've got a lot of highs, which has been great. It's been you win probably what the ones that hold dear. Like there's obvious ones that we won the French top 14 my first year in France, and we won a European Cup in 2017, and those were great, definitely, but they're not. I wouldn't say they're definitely my favourite memories. Some of my favourite memories have just been games. There was one early on in my career. I think it was my third professional game, and it was a game that we were down. We were losing pretty quickly. I think we were down 20-0 after 20 minutes. It was when I was playing for Melbourne against the Hurricanes, and it was one of those things where you're like, oh well, this is going to be a terrible time. This is going to be a terrible game. I'm going to have, it's going to be really bad. And then I don't know, I can't explain how it changed, but we won that game. We won that game, I think, by 3 points. And the feeling that I hold on to and the real happiness is coming from the point of the switch where things are looking bad, but I for some reason they're going well. And I don't know. It's hard to explain that kind of feeling when you think everything's terrible like that, and you're like, you don't have. I had no answers to any questions that were happening on the rugby pitch. I just thought we were all screwed. But then, as a team, we were able to come together, and it worked out fantastic. So that kind of unexplained success really triggered my happiness switch, and it made me feel really good.
I love it. I love it's an early memory as well, because it's stuck with you for so many years, and the fact you remember the exact score and things, it just shows. It's super interesting for sure.
And then regrets. Regrets comes back to what I said before. I don't have regrets. You just got to move forward. Regrets, like anyone, I've got a million regrets. There's a lot of things I should have done and shouldn't have done, but I forgive myself and move forward. That's the best way to kind of progress in life.
No, that's perfect, mate. And I think I was kind of expecting you to say that, but it's still one of those I like to ask the question and see where we end up. It's we're on a journey on this discussion for sure. So in the past, success on the pitch, it's a bit more easy to measure, kind of, the success of potentially a PB from training, or winning a match, or winning a title. It's a little bit more quantifiable. How do you now measure success? In the role you're doing now in the corporate world, very different now. There's an obvious, yes, I closed a deal.
Yeah.
But how are you looking at success? Is it lots of little things to make a big one? And if so, how do you break those up? Or is it ultimately I've got a wish board and I'm working towards X, Y, Z? Or how are you sort of measuring and defining that success for yourself?
Yeah. So probably two ways. Kind of two categories. There's like my business success, which is client outcomes, is really important to me. I'm in the mortgage space, so a lot of what I kind of value is helping people get mortgages and houses that didn't think they could. So that's kind of a really cool experience to be able to say to someone, hey, you don't have to rent anymore. You can buy your own house. I don't know what your listeners are like, but in Australia and New Zealand, property is really important to people. People really want to own their value owning their own house. So that's kind of my industry is based around. But then personal success is balance. So being able to work and I work with people that I really like and really enjoy being around. So that's important. And then, but also being able to step away from work and hang out with my family. You talked earlier about finding that kind of congruence between what you value and what you're passionate about, and what you can really earn enough money to live the lifestyle you want. So that's where my personal success is. So what I'm passionate about is people. So hanging out with good people and working with good people, and so that's how I identify that I'm doing what I'm passionate about. I am working what I'm passionate about because I like working with people. So so that's how I kind of value, or that's how I that's my criteria to personal success, is finding that autonomy and still hanging out with good people.
That's a real nice one there. I think that I think if you surround yourself with like-minded, fun people, good things happen from there. I mean, it's that whole you're a sum of the five people you're closest to, and I think
Yeah,
that's something I've really focused on in the last few years is if there's somebody that is negative, toxic, etc., you don't have to ignore them, but just don't have them as close. Just
yeah,
move them away from your inner circle a little bit,
yeah.
because they
I
they
think
will bring you down a bit. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think I learned a lot about the importance of people through my rugby career because I was part of kind of teams that were successful, but I wasn't happy in them on a personal level being in that team. So I didn't have close relationships, or maybe I was performing well and the team was performing well, but
Mm,
they weren't my happiest memories because I wasn't happy with how I sat within the team. And then even conversely to that, I mean, the first 4 years I played in Melbourne, I think we won 14 games out of a total I think it's 26 games a season. So, and we won 14 over 4 years. So, we didn't win a lot, but I was
hmm.
extremely happy in that team. I had really close friends and close relationships in that team, and that was, at the end of the day, I can walk away and I say those are kind of some of the happiest memories because I was happy in that team. It doesn't really matter whether I won or lost. What matters was the relationships that I had. So that's why I really value the people that I work with. I find that's way more important than anything else.
Yeah, that's interesting. And off the back of that, when you are contacted by another team, so come, we're interested in you coming and joining. It's a little bit different on a corporate perspective. On a corporate perspective, yeah, you can ask a couple of friends, do you know somebody that works there? You can look up a bit of information about them. But on a playing style, you have a bit of a slightly different, unique insight because you can see, to, you know, France call you up, right? Come and play for us. So you already know what sort of style they are. You have your kind of understanding from the outside looking in. And yes, you then go and have your interview, talk to the coach. How much insight do you get on the team so that or are you making that decision on if the guy can explain to me what my role is in the team, I'm happy?
Yeah.
How does that balance work? Yeah.
Yeah, it's really funny because you'd assume a lot of those things happen. So some of the rugby contracts are, here's your contract, take it or leave it. So there's not a lot of interaction within the team and within the culture and trying to find out what you fit. I'd say to the detriment of a lot of contracts. So I think what rugby teams should be doing is first port of call is should be going to your playing group and saying, hey, do you know this player? What do you think of him? Will he fit within our culture? If not, why? Or and having those conversations. But a lot of it is done on kind of face value, where they go, oh, he plays good rugby. Let's give him a contract and see if he fits in this culture. Where it definitely doesn't work. I mean, some guys can be great players in one team and horrible players in another team. So, um, uh, in terms of that, yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I didn't really have a lot of insight jumping in. There was most of my contracts. I mean, I only went to 4 professional teams, so I didn't make a lot of changes. The one to the one move into France was the biggest one where I knew what the team is, and I knew who the team was and how they played, but I didn't know anyone in the team. So, which was great. I mean, it was a great experience. I got to learn a lot, but it was a scary experience. Yeah, so I don't really have an answer for you there. It doesn't really they
Hmm.
don't do enough culture fit, I'd say, in rugby, in professional rugby contracts, or at least in my experience, they don't have enough culture fit. And
Yeah.
it is really because you can get, and I've seen it. I've seen many instances where really, really good players have moved to a team and they get paid a lot of money to move, and you think they're going to be great because they were great somewhere else, but they don't fit in with the culture, so it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's one of
No,
those.
it's so true. It's so true. We've all had those either happen to ourselves or we've known people where they've taken a new job and they've excelled, or they've taken a new job and they've struggled. So yeah, business, rugby, sport in general, it all comes back to people. It all comes back to culture. And again, that's part of why I was really keen for us to do this today. Is we all hear you know the next the newest initiative from a business around health, the newest initiative around mental awareness, the newest initiative around, Dubai has the Dubai 30 challenge where it's, doing exercise for 30 minutes of 30 days and things like this. And then businesses wrap that into kind of some of their offerings. We all have that, but I still don't think there's enough talk that happens in terms of, well, what could that side of the coin learn from this side, and what can you learn from them, what can they learn from you, in terms of, like you said, professional sport could learn a lot more around looking at the culture side, and from a business perspective, this is pretty much leading us nice into the final question. From your sort of playing days, and I know you're early in your sort of corporate career, but what have you seen as, I'd love if in the corporate world this was there, this is there in sport, but it's not there in a corporate world. And that doesn't mean that your current role is good or bad or anything like that, but just simply from what I've seen in my experience so far, I'd love it if the corporate world embraced this a bit more. I think it would really help. Is there anything like that?
Yeah, there definitely is. And this isn't relevant to my work environment. It's kind of just a general feeling I get from people is that criticism, the way you are criticised in rugby is extremely brutal. So it's to the point where it's almost personal. It's not, and I'll use polite language, but it's you're bad and not very constructive. But then on the flip side of that, I'd say corporate, there's probably not enough criticism in terms of constructive criticism. So there's not enough feedback where it's like, hey, that's not good enough, this is what needs to be done. And I don't know how you can balance that from an HR point of view, because there's definitely people's mental health that needs to be looked after. But I'd say from my experience in a rugby environment, where mental health is not looked after, there's a balance between how feedback and criticism needs to be done. I wouldn't say I know the balance, but there's what I'm. Yeah, it's hard to explain. I don't want to say that criticism or feedback should be brutal, but it needs. For me, and how I would react to it, I react well to bad criticism. I react well for someone saying that's not good enough, and that helps me get better. Whereas I don't know if a lot of people are getting that kind of criticism or feedback in their work lives and using that to make themselves better.
Yeah, it's a real balance from my experience in what I've seen in businesses I've worked in. What I kind of see is sometimes it's managers maybe not being trained in the right way, but on the flip side, sometimes, and this is something which is a strange cultural thing, and I mean for society, I don't mean for the Middle East or anything, but people want feedback, but there is a lot of people that actually don't want to be told that they did it wrong, or they then turn it into an argument about they disagree with the feedback. And that's the biggest challenge. Is I agree with you. I think there should be that kind of feedback culture that's a bit more honest, but then people kind of need to learn how to take it as well.
So that comes down to the kind of the management relationship. I mean, you really should be only giving critical feedback if you have a good relationship with your employee, because they trust you and they trust your feedback. If you don't have that trust, then the feedback's not going to land, and they're going to think it's kind of a personal attack. So if I'm getting feedback from someone that I know cares about me and wants me to move forward, then even if it's bad feedback, I'll take it personally and use it to move forward, because I know they want the best for me. So I think that's kind of the most important step.
That's a really well put point. No, that's perfect. Okay, in terms of from my side, look, I could definitely chat to you all day. I'm equally conscious of not taking up too much of your time. If we were kind of, if we were to wrap things up with a kind of 1, 2, 3, whatever's going to work best for you, kind of life lessons or takeaway points for people, and this can be, maybe a corporate one, maybe a playing career one, maybe if I could do this differently. We've touched on some of these throughout, so this is maybe these points are a bit more of a there might be something new you're about to say. This might be summaries of what we've already discussed, but what would be your kind of 1, 2, 3 sort of takeaway messages for people? And this might be, again, corporate, player, father, whatever it might be. What's kind of your takeaway points on life? And so far in my life, still plenty to be wrote, but so far, what's the kind of takeaways for you?
Yeah. Well, I think we kind of already talked about before that I've and I can say, I'm trying to say this objectively, I've achieved great things, and I mean that in terms of I've got titles and trophies of great things, and they're not super important to me. So they are not what I value and what I care about the most. And I think a lot of people get caught up in, whether it's titles or trophies or roles or titles of jobs or earning a certain amount and that kind of levels. I just don't think that matters that much. I think what matters is at the end who you are as a person and who you hang around with. So that sphere of influence. So what matters to me is the people that I hang around with, the people I spend my time talking to, and the people that I choose to spend my time with. And I think it's almost back to my school motto was honour non honours, which is Latin for don't worry about awards and achievements. And I don't know if I got drilled into it at high school, or that's just kind of something that flows through my life, where those achievements, they don't really, no one really cares. No one wants to hear you talk about them really either. They care about you as a person, and you can see the inside of a person, and that's what's important.
Yeah. No, that's really nice. I mean, it's a great way to kind of finish up today, because again, it's great to touch on some of the rugby part of your career because it's such a big part of your life. But I think again, it's trying to delve a bit deeper, as I hope the listeners have taken from today, is to the man behind that, what made him do certain things, what does he value, what kind of drove him to do certain things. And I think there's probably a million people out there that will tell you the favorite try they scored, but have those same people opened up about what certain things mean to them, and on a personal note, how do they gain that trust and fulfillment and all of those things. So yeah, look, I think that's a lovely way to finish today. I've really enjoyed the chat, and again, look forward to seeing you on the next sevens, as it were. But yeah, mate, absolutely. But yeah,
I had a sore shoulder for a good 10 days, so I'll have to do a bit more contact work before the next one.
Sounds good, mate. Sounds good. Again, thanks so much for today. And yeah, we'll be in touch soon. Thanks, buddy. Have a great one. Cheers.